Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter, New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneider, joined as always by my co-host, Nick Filato. Today, we are sponsored by Manscaped. For those who don't know, I use them, and they're great. I don't do the best job with my manscaping until I had Manscaped, and then I did better. And if you want to improve your manscaping as well, I'm using that as a verb, but I enjoy it. Go check out manscaped.com and use the code BIGBLUE to get a discount at checkout. Today, we are going to be discussing the Giants' decision to bench Daniel Jones coming out of the bye week and their decision to go forward with Tommy DeVito as the new starting quarterback, not Drew Lock, and the new shape of the depth chart at quarterback with Tommy DeVito at QB1, Drew Lock at QB2, and Daniel Jones demoted down to QB3. Obviously, Nick, as we know, Joe Shane giving a lot of lip service in that presser. One of those things that he said is, no, we will just make this decision based on football decision. But if that were the case, it's hard to believe Daniel Jones would have been demoted all the way down to QB3. I think the objective here is, yes, he was playing terrible football. I mean, Daniel Jones is 3-13 in his last 16 starts, 10 touchdowns, 13 interceptions over his last 16 starts. That's not a starting quarterback right there. But there's also the injury guarantee, which is clearly playing a factor in his demotion to QB3 versus QB2. So where do you want to start? There's a lot of things going on there at the QB room. What's the one that stands out most to you?
First off, it's the end of an era. It's been 6 years. This entire podcast's existence, Dan.
Oh.
Daniel Jones was the de facto starting quarterback. I know he was out for some, but he was a starting quarterback, and it looks like that era has officially ended. RIP to the Daniel Jones era. 72 career passing touchdowns, 15 rushing touchdowns, 48 interceptions, 51 fumbles, a 24-45-1 record. With all of that out of the way, it's interesting that the Giants are opting to go with Tommy Cutlets, Tommy DeVito, and trying to rekindle whatever magic they experienced during the 2023 season instead of Drew Lock, somebody the New York Giants signed, brought in here, and ostensibly he was going to be the starting quarterback if there was a hiccup in Daniel Jones's rehab. As I've said a couple times on this podcast, Dan, never seemed comfortable throughout training camp. I was at a bunch of those training camp practices. Drew Lock never seemed comfortable. I get that. Sometimes you can buy something and then realize it wasn't as good as you presumed. But what does this actually say, though, Dan, about the Giants' ability to evaluate quarterbacks, that they actually signed this Drew Lock guy in there, brought him in, and now it's going to be Tommy DeVito. Tommy DeVito in the offseason was pissed. He felt like he was slighted by the New York Giants a little bit. I don't know if you guys remember that little story was manifesting and coming out. Well, is this more of an indictment on Drew Lock's inability to really seize the opportunity in Brian Daboll's offense? Is an indictment on Joe Shane's ability to evaluate quarterbacks, or is it just Tommy DeVito is the next Peyton Manning? What do you think? Those are the only
yeah. What'd you say?
Those are the only three options, by the way.
Yeah, those are the only three possible options. It's an interesting question. There's a lot to unpack when it comes to this, what's going on right now. I think to start, I do want to comment on the stats that you brought up because I saw them in your tweet. It's unbelievable to me that Daniel Jones was a starter for 6 years and had more turnovers than touchdowns total, including his rushing touchdowns. He averaged fewer than a passing touchdown. I think it was one passing touchdown per game or fewer. Just unbelievable that was the barometer for what a starter could be. Hopefully we get my point in saying that is hopefully we get more out of DeVito now that he's the starter, just because I think Giants fans deserve to watch some kind of functioning offense for the rest of the season. Obviously things are going to change moving forward. I think this is a test to see if DeVito can be the QB2 moving forward. I'm a bit skeptical of that personally, but I like the idea of not having to allocate a lot of cap space to that if you believe he's functional, and let's see if he can prove to be functional. Now, on that note, I think it's important to start by saying that a lot of what was considered a magic for Tommy DeVito last year was the wins that the Giants had, the 3 wins when he was a starter. Now, in 2 of those wins, it was mostly just turnover luck for the Giants. They had 6 turnovers, the defense, in one of the games against Washington that DeVito won. 6 turnovers. In another game against the Patriots, Mac Jones handed the game over with turnovers, and then the Patriots missed a chip shot field goal at the end to lose the game. Tommy DeVito had negative EPA in these starts. The only game where I thought he looked pretty good was Green Bay, but that wasn't even that good, honestly. I think there's a realistic chance that DeVito could be worse than Daniel Jones was for this offense, as crazy as that is to sound, because Jones at least had the 2 Washington games and the Seattle game where he moved the ball, Daniel Jones. Can't take that away from him. His bottoms, his lows were really low, Daniel Jones. The Minnesota, not even the Steelers, the Minnesota, the Philly, the Dallas, and the Cincinnati games. And even Dallas had some good plays, just missed a lot of the big shots. But I'm skeptical and nervous about DeVito. And I think we're kind of being sold this bill, at least through the media, Nick, that DeVito is starting because he has more experience with the offense, because Drew Lock was injured in camp and didn't get those reps he needed. I don't know if that's the case. I don't know if I believe that. I take that at face value. Where do you stand on that?
I'm the same way. I take it at face value, and I think it's just Drew Lock's not under contract next year. Tommy DeVito could be.
Yeah.
Tommy DeVito could be that backup. So why don't you play the young guy who does have experience? Like, that experience is valuable, right? But that's not the sole reason why the New York Giants are going forward with Tommy DeVito. And I'm glad that you brought up those questions about DeVito, because you're right. Look, the DeVito craze was fun, especially because there's so many damn Italian Americans up in this area, chicken cutlets, it's all fun, but the guy's only thrown for over 200 yards in a game once in his career. It's not like he was lighting it up last season. It was just
there was some dysfunctional offense during his starts, really dysfunctional.
Yeah, there were some dysfunctional offenses, held onto the football too long, took a lot more sacks than even a guy like Daniel Jones did. And it ultimately ended up him getting benched on prime time, Tyrod coming in, and the offense just looked explosive again, because Tyrod is a real veteran quarterback. With that said, I'm still looking forward to seeing this offense ran by Tommy DeVito, see if he took some sort of step. I just don't, I think it's more, I think people understand that. And I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think a lot of people do understand that. They're just excited, Dan, that it's over, man. They're just excited that this Daniel Jones craze is over. That's more so what I think. And that the page has turned. Whether it was going to be Drew Lock or Tommy DeVito, it didn't matter. Now that it's Tommy DeVito, we can just start making jokes about chicken cutlets again.
Well, I think that's right. And I think that's fair. I don't think a lot of fans are going to be, I guess, emotionally hurt by that, like by the fact that some fans are happy that the Daniel Jones is over. No, that's okay. It doesn't mean you hate Daniel Jones. We all recognize and understand the work he put in and how hard he wanted to win and is putting his body on the line. We revere those types of things. But we also understand that he was unbelievably and exceptionally poor from a statistical standpoint, from an advanced standpoint, and on tape over the course of his career. You brought up the numbers, Nick, 22 and 45, more turnovers than passing touchdowns, more turnovers than total touchdowns, not even averaging a touchdown a game. Never, even in his rookie year, Nick, did he go over 7 yards per attempt. That's the barometer for quarterback play. Everyone under 7 yards per attempt is a bench quarterback, a backup quarterback, should not be starting in the NFL. And he never had one season where he eclipsed the 7 yard per attempt passing mark, Daniel Jones. So he deserved to be benched. That's for sure. And I understand why people are happy that this is over. It should have been over a long time ago. It's over now. And the question is, can Tommy DeVito learn, like you said, from a processing standpoint? What scares me is at the beginning of the Tommy DeVito era last year, Nick, if I want to call it an era, let's just call it the run, whatever. He was doing things that were fun to watch on tape, right? He was taking those whole shots outside the numbers, running concepts that were working outside the numbers. Defenses kind of took that away toward the end of it, took away the concepts he liked. They forced him to be a middle of the field processor. He was really bad at processing the middle of the field, in my estimation, from what I saw on tape last year as a passer. And when that stopped, it almost was like the entire offense stopped. I don't trust him down the field. I think he's arguably, I know some people disagree because it looks so bad on tape this year, but I think he's a worse deep ball thrower than Daniel Jones by a considerable margin. I don't expect us to have any kind of fun in the deep half with Tommy DeVito. There might be some times where he finds something and something's open and he could hit it. But I think it's not going to be a situation where defenses are backing off the Giants, where they're playing further off the ball and respecting our deep and intermediate game now that Tommy DeVito's in. And I'll be honest with you, Nick, it's a little disappointing from my standpoint because I did kind of want to see what Drew Lock could do on the deep and intermediate levels of this offense. See if we can finally unlock what Neighbors is clearly offers on a vertical game. And as well as even guys like Hyatt and Slayton on the deep half and in the intermediate half. See some posts, see some backside digs, things of that nature. But ultimately, I think DeVito's understanding of the offense is what won out here for the Giants. And I think what you said, the long-term aspirations of can he potentially be your QB2? And I'm not going to lie, Nick, not to be a conspiracy theorist, but I think part of this is also the fact that Tommy DeVito is going to sell some tickets and get people back in that stadium for a little while.
It's not a conspiracy at all. You're 100% accurate about that. For all the reasons that we talked about a little bit earlier, the fact that he is Italian and there's such a massive Italian populace in this area. And we saw that he was able to create a media storm last year in a lost season to where the Giants were able to sell a little bit and be somewhat exciting down the stretch of a complete disaster of a season coming off of a year where you won a playoff game. But you brought up a very good point, Dan, that I wanted to discuss because as much as we're, it's the page is turned on Daniel Jones, this offense will likely take a step back from one standpoint, and that is targeting over the middle of the field. Last year, Tommy DeVito, 10 plus yards over the middle of the field in between the numbers was 7 of 17, about 41% completion rate, was not great on those deep intermediate digs and those crossing routes that Daniel Jones, specifically the dig routes, has had success with even in this season. So this offense will change up, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because I do want to see see some more of those sale concepts and those concepts that are targeted outside the numbers. And Tommy DeVito did a good job last year. Remember Daniel Bellinger in the Raiders game? There was Jalen Hyde up the sideline a couple times in the Patriot game and the Washington game as well, where he was able to hit some of these passes up the sideline outside the numbers from like number 3 wide receivers in 3-by-1 sets. So I think the offense is going to slightly change. We're going to be able to perceive that, not just on the all 22, but more than likely also through the on the live broadcast. It's just, will it be functional? That's the main question.
Yes.
And I'm not sold that it will be. And I'm not saying that it won't be either, but the change was necessary.
Yeah, I'm not sold that it will be. I'm not sold that it won't be. I'm not sold that we have seen the last of this quarterback situation. I think Drew Lock could make some starts this year for the Giants because I'm looking through it now, some numbers to corroborate what I was saying before, Nick. In the Giants' 3 wins with DeVito last year, their team offensive EPA in those wins was minus 4.1, minus 15.7. They won a game, minus 15.7 and minus 1.0. They never had a positive EPA on offense in any of DeVito's wins, but the defense and special teams EPA in those wins, plus 16.1, plus 18.7, and plus 3.0. That's not a winning formula, especially when we consider the Giants' defensive and special teams EPA hasn't been all that outstanding this year, and that they're not going to face, was it Howell at that point, or who was playing quarterback for Washington in that game? I think it was Howell, who throws a million interceptions, and Mac Jones in these coming up games. They're going to have to face different quarterbacks like Baker Mayfield and
Zach
Lamar
Wilson
Jackson.
Too. The Jet game, the defense's EPA was really high in that game as well.
And they didn't even win that game. I was just talking about the wins that DeVito was in. You're right.
But if you remember that game, the Giants' offense was non-existent. It was just, hey, Kayvon Thibodeau, Dexter Lawrence, you guys do your thing. And the defense should have won the game. Hey, everyone. With the holidays creeping up faster than your aunt's fruitcake recipe, I've got something way better to share with you. If you want to look sharp for all those festive gatherings and maybe finally win that best groomed at the family dinner award, check out the latest masterpiece from Manscaped, the Chairman Pro Electric Foil Shaver. Trust me, it's like Rudolph for your face, guiding you to a smooth, irritation-free shave. Head over to manscaped.com and join the over 11 million men worldwide who trusted Manscaped by using code BIGBLUE for 20% off plus free shipping. Think of Manscaped as your grooming superhero, the skin-safe 4-blade foil for when you want that baby's bottom smooth, and that skin-safe stubble trimmer for when you want to keep some stubble but clean it up a bit so you'll look good for the holidays. Get the Chairman Pro today and experience a shave that is as smooth as you deserve. Get 20% off plus free shipping with the code BIGBLUE at manscaped.com. That's 20% off plus free shipping with the code BIGBLUE at manscaped.com. I love a great deal as much as the next guy, but I'm not going to crawl through a bed of hot coals just to save a few bucks. It has to be easy. No hoops, no BS. So when Mint Mobile said it was easy to get wireless for $15 a month with the purchase of a 3-month plan, I called them on it. Turns out, it really is that easy to get wireless for $15 a month. The longest part of the process was the time I spent on hold waiting to break up with my old provider. And you can have a similar experience. To get this new customer offer from Mint Mobile and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/BBB. That's mintmobile.com/BBB. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/BBB. That's 3 Bs. $45 payment upfront required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower, above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
Look, we all wear underwear every single day, and we all have complaints. They ride up, they're not comfortable, they don't fit correctly. I shared these complaints until I started wearing Skims. When I tried Skims stretch boxer briefs, I felt like I finally found that missing link. They gave me all the movement I needed for the workout. They were comfortable while I was sitting here podcasting and watching all of this New York Giants film. Everything from the texture to the fit worked for me, and it will work for you too. It is a great product, and I highly recommend it. Shop Skims Men's at skims.com. Let them know we sent you after you place your order. Select podcast in the survey and select our show, Big Blue Banter, in the drop-down menu that follows.
That's a good point by you. Like, even in the game that they didn't win, but they almost won, it was, again, that situation. So I just want to set the stage. Like, I'm not trying to discredit Tommy DeVito. I hope he has improved. I hope he's improved as a processor. He obviously can make some plays at times, and he made plays last year. He did. He made some out of structure throws. He made some good throws, like you talked about, outside the numbers in intermediate range. But overall, it's important to not misremember like runs. We misremember a lot of things, I think, in this fan base. We misremember 2019 in a big way, as far as like, because I saw his tweet today, like, say whatever you want about Pat Shermer, but he was the guy who got the most out of Daniel Jones. I'm like, what do you mean? Clearly, Brian Dable did. In 2019, Daniel Jones had a negative EPA against every good defense he faced that year. He was horrible. He was a turnover machine. Yeah, he had 24 passing touchdowns. Is that all we're going to look at? He didn't throw for a lot of yards per attempt. He didn't throw for a lot of yards. Every good defense got him. How about 2022 when Brian Dable made him make the playoffs and actually have a positive EPA for the first time in his career? That's what got them. That's the coach who got the most out of Daniel Jones. I hated that take, and I want to not stop misremembering 2019 the way we have, and I don't want to misremember this DeVito run. It was mostly defense and special teams that won the games for the Giants. So it leads us to believe, to believe that maybe it could be a struggle for this offense. I don't know. I hope not, man. I hope there's some kind of success for this team. But It is interesting when you read all the stuff, man, about like, I'm not into the conspiracy theories at all, Nick, but there are like a lot of people who are tweeting like, hey man, let's just take a look at this. Like Sam Monson tweeted from PFF. Actually, I don't think he's with PFF anymore. He tweeted, he's not, sorry about that. And he's been on the show, a great guest. He tweeted, the Giants benching Daniel Jones for Tommy Cutlets is the finest execution of soft tanking ever. Cynically protect yourself from guaranteeing Jones's contract for injury. Pick the QB most likely to lose for better draft position, and then keep fans engaged with Cutlet memes. It's masterful. And Seth Walder tweeted that from ESPN, tweeted, this morning the Giants had a 12% chance to earn the number 1 overall pick per FBI, and that's his advanced metric from ESPN. After switching to Tommy DeVito, they now have a 21% chance. So it's clear that outside the organization, they believe, like people who are analysts outside the organization, believe that this is a little bit of a soft tanking type move and aren't fully sold that DeVito gives them a better chance to win than Locke or Jones.
Yeah, the whole like soft tanking. It's the Jones thing. Is yes, with the contract, you're going to bench him, and with the play that he's put out there, it's not crazy. And I don't even think it's conspiratorial to suggest like, one of the primary reasons why they benched him was because of that injury guarantee coming out of a bye week. Now it's the whole starting Tommy DeVito over Drew Lock thing. It's, to me, if Drew Lock inspired anything within my stupid eyes that I saw at training camp, I would buy it a little bit more. But he looked terrible. He did not look good. It was literally like, my first read's not there, I'm going to run. Now he was playing with like Josh Azudu as his left tackle, and there was offensive line issues. I get that. But I don't think John Mara is sitting up there saying, we're going to tank and lose games, right? I think they understood from an economical standpoint that Tommy DeVito may be able to sell tickets, and there's not a big enough difference between Drew Lock right now and Tommy DeVito, with Tommy DeVito's experience in the offense, that would make them be like, hey, let's just go with Drew Lock when we have edges in other areas of running this football organization that Tommy DeVito might provide. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. And I'm with you. I don't believe in conspiracy theories. I want to see that DeVito.
I think it's funny. Like, and one thing, and I'm sorry to cut you off. One thing I do want to make clear though, and this is something that John Mara and the Tishes, they got to be like so upset about. Everybody's laughing at the Giants right now. We're a laughing stock. Again, this Daniel Jones situation, how Saquon Barkley is performing with the Philadelphia Eagles. And I'm not one of those guys like, oh, you know how Dan and I felt if you're a longtime listener. I still feel that way about Saquon Barkley. And we said so many times when Saquon Barkley signed with the Philadelphia Eagles, all throughout next year, when Saquon Barkley has a great game, people are going to recircle this back and be like, Joe Shane, you're an idiot for doing this, all that kind of stuff. But we knew this wasn't even a possibility. And when we saw Daniel Jones suck so bad against Minnesota, it ended up becoming an inevitability. And now the entire NFL world is laughing. And what does that say? What does John Mara view about that? How does that impact his decisions moving forward with Joe Shane? And more importantly, Brian Dable. I think Shane is okay. Dable, that's a big question for me, dude. As a lot of people are reporting on right now, Dan.
Yeah, a lot of people are reporting that he's more on the hot seat than we know and than we imagine, which is understandable, I think, at this point. And I'll say this, Nick, it leads me to believe that he has a plan for DeVito in these starts. And that's the one thing I'm hopeful for about the offense. I don't want to bury DeVito, and I feel like I have on this podcast. I am hopeful that he can be better than he was last year. I just want us to remember what it actually was last year. For the Giants, because it's not a guarantee that we're going to see better offense. Now, I have one more point I want to make, and I wanted to make this first, but we're going to have to talk about it more on a final podcast. because look, we can talk all we want about this QB2 decision for now with Locker DeVito, who's going to get the better chance, whatever. But more important is the long term here, Nick. And yes, I know they're selling us this story. They're looking at DeVito as a QB2. I'm not really into him as a QB2 long term. Personally, I believe in investing big in QB2. If he's cheap, it's fine. Way to save cap, whatever, if he proves capable. But for me, what really hurts me, Nick, and what really is the core of this whole mess of a situation is my lack of confidence and my lack of faith in Joe Shane, who's going to have to find a way to restore it. Because on Hard Knocks, Nick, he said to us, and it's a quote, he said to us, nobody could have won with the Giants offensive line last year, not even Patrick Mahomes. And while that may be true, Nick, and I agree with him, it doesn't also mean two things can be mutually exclusive. Yeah. It doesn't also mean that Daniel Jones can be good with a good offensive line. And we saw that, and we proved, and a number one receiver like they got him in Neighbors. We proved that this year. So for Joe Shane to go into this year with now what we clearly are proven on paper, right? They didn't go with Drew Lock. It's proven now that they don't believe in Drew Lock, that they didn't invest in that QB2 situation to a point where they put in somebody who could actually push Jones to be the starter, or actually come in if the Giants are losing games again with Jones. So for them to have gone through and had all the tape to work with and the entire career of Jones, and to go back into this season and say, we believe he's got one more chance, we just need to see it, they should have already known on Jones. That's the biggest indictment I have on this entire regime right now. The fact that they didn't already know on Jones going into this year. I don't care how bad the O-line was. There's a career's worth of bad tape, bad raw stats, bad advanced stats, no it moments, no ability to win in the stretch. Like, he was not the guy, and it should have been obvious at that point to them. So for them to go into this year just essentially throwing out the season is what they did at quarterback. Yeah. When you don't have a quarterback, you're throwing out the season in general for your team. It's a big problem for me moving forward. It's a big, it's hard for me to restore the faith after what they did at quarterback season. And I was willing to let go of everything before that. I knew he had to re-sign him after going to the playoffs. He was in a bad spot. And yeah, he could have franchise tagged him. That's another story. They might not, but he didn't want to sign Barkley long-term. So it was a tricky situation. And then, but everything was fine for me until this season, where they just said, you know what, let's give him another chance with the O-line and the receiver. That was a mistake. Everyone in that organization should have known by this point that he was not going to be a good quarterback at the NFL level.
I 100% agree. And it's, like I said, they threw away the life preserver. That was Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson was your way out of this. Just say, hey, I can't guarantee you the starting job, but it will be a competition with this quarterback coming off of a torn ACL. At that point, you should have known, like, hey, we gave him that contract. We were put in that spot after the 2022 season. Right. This is a way to hedge against that possible mistake, and what at that time 5 years of tape would suggest was a mistake. And that's why I'm right on board with you when it comes to Joe Shane. And I hope, man, because I don't think he's going to get fired after this season, Joe Shane. So he's going to be selecting this next quarterback. And it's a different dynamic. It's a different situation than every decision that he's made when it comes to Daniel Jones. But he handled the Daniel Jones situation poorly, especially after the 2023 season, when you had the injury that you can lean back on. You could have brought in real competition and said, well, we don't know if he's going to be healthy. You could have just kept making logical excuses that would have convinced Daniel Jones and Daniel Jones's ego, if you were really concerned about that, hey, we had to bring in real competition here. And then you had $1.5 million. That's all you were going to pay this dude in Russell Wilson. And you decided against it because you wanted to guarantee Daniel Jones a shot at that. And you doubled down on your bad mistake from the 2020.
Well, that's exactly it.
Exactly.
He doubled down on his bad mistake. He said, no, it's just the bad O-line. Let's see what we can do with him. This had to already be it's so frustrating for me. You had to already know. It has nothing to do with 2023. You knowing if Jones is going to be the guy in forward, throw out 2023. Don't even use it in your evaluation. Just use 2019 through 2022. And that's enough to work with, that this guy isn't the answer. We went over the stats at the beginning. He's lost almost every game he's started. He loses every game. He doesn't throw touchdown passes. He turns the ball over at a crazy rate over his career and doesn't move the ball, doesn't throw for yards. This is not a guy. His tape is horrible. Yeah. Everything about it should have already been obvious to you. You shouldn't be using the one outlier season 2022 that wasn't even as good as advertised, because it was just a gimmicky offense where he didn't even do really much, and just say, well, he didn't have receivers. Enough of the excuses. Look at the freaking full picture here.
Yeah. No, I'm right there with you. And I wish we could speak more on this, but we do have to go. But Dan and I will be back later in the week with another podcast to discuss.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack, not just on this. There's a lot to unpack overall on who's moving forward. If we want these people making those decisions at quarterback, things like that are on the table now as we move forward with just a wasted season by this GM.
It's a crowded table. There's a lot on it. There's a lot on that freaking table right now. And a lot
messy, crowded table that hasn't been cleaned up in a long time.
It's not organized.
No, it's not organized at all. All right. That's all the time we have for today. We're both on the run today, but thank you so much for tuning into this quick recap. We'll have a great rest of your week, and we'll be back midweek, maybe with a mailbag or something where we can really flesh out more of this.